Hello, everybody, and welcome to 3D6 Charge, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k, the state of the game, and community news. I am your host, Chris Vo, and joining me tonight is Kevin Lieb.
Howdy, howdy.
And Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, so tonight we figured we'd talk about the Nachmund Secondaries, Warzone Nachmund. They've changed a little bit from GT 2021. I personally think in a good way, but we'll talk about that later. We've gotten each of us has gotten a lot of experience under our belts so far with the new secondaries, and yeah, I think it's a good time to talk about it. It's a little bit different than just reading the new secondaries and just thinking about it. It's different to actually play a few games and get that experience. I got most of my experience with the Nachmund Secondaries over this past weekend at a GT. Yeah. I took a Crusher Stampede list. I went 3-2 with it, which I'm very happy with, considering, before I went to the GT, I had a total of 2 games with Tyranids ever, and both of them were in the week leading up to the GT.
I remember 3 weeks ago when you didn't own any Tyranid models.
Yeah. Crazy. I went from no Tyranids to a Crusher Stampede army in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I remember one of those practice games.
Yeah, I found out that invuls are very important to the survivability of Crusher Stampede.
Yeah, don't feed to macarons to thousands on smites is a good lesson.
Yep.
Hope it helped you out at the GT.
But I mean, yeah, it was a good time. It was the Captain Con GT in Warwick, Rhode Island. The TO there, John, he runs a pretty good event.
Yeah. John's a great guy.
Yeah. Brady Tatro won the event. I went 5-0. He was the only undefeated. He was playing Emperor's Chosen Custodes. The runner-up, I believe, was Orc? It was either Orcs or Slanesh.
Yeah, they did it. They did I'm still of the opinion that the 2 people who make it to the top table are first and second, and everyone else should be playing for other places. But they did it a little bit differently. So someone who won on the other tables ended up getting second. Yeah,
so it was kind of using the antiquated way of just doing win-loss record and then battle points.
Yeah, it should be noted that I believe it was Drakari Thick City made it to the final table.
It was
Brady. Yeah.
Going by that, then it was Custodes, Thick City, Orcs, a Slanesh list that was Triple Keeper of Secrets, Be'lakor, and Shalaxi Hellbane.
It's my teammate Luke.
And then
that thing no matter what.
And then another Crusher Stampede list. I've been there, but we'll get to that maybe in a little bit. Actually, should I just go over what I did in the GT?
Yeah, why not?
So round 1 was just against Salamanders. For a bit of context, the list that I brought was it was Crusher Stampede, Leviathan, obviously, but for the monsters, it was basically 2 Demacarons, a Harpy, a Barbed Hydrodual, a Swarmlord, a Hive Tyrant, and a Neurothrope for Psychic Interrogation.
And then you had 3 obligatory warrior squads for bioweapon bond and actions.
Yeah, and then a 5-man of Hive Guard.
Yep.
So it's a lot of the Crusher Stampede's lists that you've seen. So nothing special there. Went up against Salamanders. Won that one. The Salamanders player basically saw the Macarons, knew that I had 12-inch move, flip belt rule, and could double move with the Swarmlord, and deployed extremely defensively, just casted up it was diagonal deployment, so they just went as far into the corner as they could, which they didn't have the mobility to get out and grab objectives, which was basically costing them the game from deployment.
Yeah. deploying defensively like that only works for certain armies. When I played against you, I was able to deploy completely in that corner. But my entire army teleports, so I don't need to. I'm playing Cult of Duplicity Thousands. I don't need to move across the table. But there's a lot of armies against Crusher Stampede that don't have that sort of either very high speed movement, like Drakarian Raiders, or the teleportation shenanigans of like Thousand Suns. And those armies are just kind of obligated to take a hit if they go first, or if they go second.
Yeah, I will say that he did have 2 Storm Speeders, the Melta ones.
Okay.
But I had basically just popped my barbed hybrid duel right in the middle of the table, and
Gotcha.
he was pretty terrified of getting caught out in the open by that. Because they're T7 and they don't have -1 damage, and I have the strat to make them damage 3 on 12 shots.
Yeah.
So he played very cagey with his few mobile units and everything else. I basically just got pinned. So he basically lost in the. My second round was against your teammate Luke with the triple keepers, Chilaxi Hellbane and Belcor. That one I lost, and I believe it was just because I was just too aggressive with it. I was kind of just slingshotting things with the Swarmlord piecemeal into his keepers. And one of the things that was really killer is once things started coalescing in the middle, one of his keepers had like the Warlord trait for -1 attacks, and then I think there was a relic or a spell for -1 attacks, so
It's a strat.
-2 attacks. Tyranids already suffer a lot from having a low volume of attacks. I'm going from like 6 attacks to 4 on a Demacaron, and that hurts a lot, especially when for his exalted traits he's rolling like the -1 to wound or like the 4-up invul, and I know Keepers of Secrets and Slanesh units in general are fast. They always take me by surprise, but with how fast they actually are.
Yeah, he doesn't have Swarmlord, but his start range is just like not that much less than yours.
Yeah, it's however far I can threaten somebody with a Demacaron and a Swarmlord. That's basically how far I go with the Keeper.
It's a little bit of an exaggeration. He's not doing like the 24 and then charging, but it's like it's 16 to 18. It's pretty far.
Yeah,
And
it's
they
also worth
almost
noting
100.
it's 16 or 18 with any of them. With
yes.
the rest.
Yes,
Yeah.
they can all go. They can all go 18 and then charge you, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
And then Swarmlord is like, you also can only double move from within 16 inches of Swarmlord, which sometimes can be a downside because often Swarmlord wants to stay in the back, keeping himself safe. So, like, yeah, you can double move, but maybe the first move wasn't full either.
Yeah. And then on top of that, only one of your guys can advance and charge. So one of your guys can go 40, but then everyone else is like 10, 12.
Yeah,
So
basically.
he definitely has the advantage of being able to hit from multiple angles at once.
Yep. And then
you can't multi-charge him because he all fights first because it's all Slanesh. So you can't charge 2 things at once. You're always obligated to charge 1 at a time. So I could see that matchup being hard.
Yeah. I tried to pick off the keepers one at a time because I knew that they were going to fight first always. And with Tyranid degrading profiles being kind of poopy.
The old double degrade.
Yeah. Not being able to go first ever, like, really hurt. And then, of course, you've got Belcor, like, sweeping things up at the end, who's just ignoring invuls and just, stacking up Tyranid skulls.
Yeah, Belcor seems like a disaster for Crusher Stampede. It's not super clear to me how you deal with that model. Like, -1 to hit, -1 to wound. Well, he's T7, so you're winning on 4s. You can't reroll your wound rolls because he's -1 to be wounded as well. So your strength 8, -1 to wound is 4s.
I mean, you can
Can't
reroll
wounds.
You can reroll with a stratagem, but
Well, you can't. You can't reroll against Belcor.
oh, right.
So like you just get got like -1 damage, -1 attack because he's Slanesh, and on the crackback he just always kills you.
Yeah, he's
that seems brutal.
Yeah, it was like I don't think I could have done anything differently except maybe roll better. To like try to change the outcome.
I would also say that Luke has been playing some version of here's 5 greater demons for as long as I've known him, like since the beginning of 8th edition. So I would not be surprised if he just kind of outplayed you, because this is like your fifth game on this list, and he's been playing that list for actual years.
That game was my fourth game.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, no, he was a very strong opponent. Very fun to play with. Nice guy. Third game was against Jakari Raiders, plus one Cult of Strife detachment. My opponent had brought Drazar, and this was the Hammer and Anvil deployment. Both of those games I had gone, all of these games so far I had gone first. And one of my warlord traits is the strategic adaptation, redeploy 2 units. So that allows me to just deploy the Macarons super aggressively. And if I don't go first, I can pull them back. If I go first, I redeploy 2 more things to be super aggressive. With this one, he deployed his raiders not quite out of range to be hit from Hive Guard, and like if I put him on the edge of my deployment. So I used my redeploy to put the Hive Guard right up on there once I knew I was going first. Pump the CP into the Hive Guard to make sure that they popped the boat that Drazar was in. And then one-shot Drazar with breaking through in the Harpy.
Breaking through is the 1 CP strat where you just do functionally 6 mortal wounds on the charge, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a mechanic for like you roll some number of dice and then your strength matters and then toughness matters, but like it's always the 6. You always hit the cap unless your monster's very wounded.
It's almost always 6, maybe 5.
Yeah, which just kills Drazar.
Yeah. Which is
Right.
Totally deletes Drazar. I kept on using breaking through at every turn to just delete another character.
Yep. Yeah, it's not really fair.
Yeah. And so like I think when Swarmlord I am living in a world when the Tyrannid Codex comes out, Swarmlord is not going to be double moving.
I don't imagine that either.
Or if he does, it turns off charges. Like I can't imagine a role where you can still just double move and charge.
Yeah. But even with that, like we've already seen the Harpy kind of become like a thing that people like are bringing one of as a tech. Just being able to just like, I can't imagine that Maul's going to move less than 30 inches still, and that's still just like enough to come in.
Sure.
Oh god, I'm getting into the second one right now because I want to bring 2 now.
Yeah, most Crusher Stampede lists I've seen be very successful have 2 flying monsters because it's just so dumb. They can do so much. You assassinate characters with 6 mortal wounds. They have 12 there are 12 obsec bodies that can go 30 to 60 inches. Like you just put them on objectives, you shield objectives, you put them into characters, you pop characters. It does too much. Harpies are actually think the best thing of the Crusher Stampede list, which is insane because your Macarons are busted and secretly you're losing your Harpies.
Yeah.
Macarons like will do the damage, but you just lose all your points to Harpies. Games are 1 in points.
Yeah.
The Macarons are the real like the new distraction Carnifex. The Harpies, you win on the backs of the Harpy.
They're hell of a good distraction Carnifex.
Not so
Let me
much.
tell you about distraction Carnifex is that kill one of your units, then explode, then fight on death as a distraction.
They also have 18 wounds with a 4 vulnerable save and a 5 upfield on pain. So
Also,
sometimes you don't even get to kill them.
Yeah, and it does D3 plus 3 damage with its weapons, and then possibly D6 mortal wounds afterwards.
All right, but enough about Crusher Stampede. Let's keep talking about Crusher Stampede. What was your next round like, Chris?
My next round was against another Tyrannid list, but this was the Devagant list. So he had a brick of 30 Devour Termagants, 6 Hive Guard, and then assorted few spatterings of Hormagaunts, Warriors, and then 2 units of Gene Stealers.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember what else he had for. He had a Malin. Yeah, he had a Malinthrope. This was another one where my opponents kind of lost in deployment because we both were playing Leviathan. We both had the strategic adaptation thing. I rolled to go first, and when you both have strategic adaptation, you roll off to see who redeploys first. He won the roll off, so he would redeploy first, which I wanted because I'm going first. I want to redeploy second, and he kind of just left his Hive Guard just out in the not out in the middle, but like all the way tucked in a corner. We're playing Dawn of War, so using my redeploy, I just took my Swarmlord and one Demacron, just moved them across the tape from the table from the Hive Guard, and slingshotted it. Did all of the stratagems I could just to make sure that the Hive Guard got deleted.
And then his entire army is strength 4, and your entire army is toughness 8, and the game is over.
That's basically it. This game though was the one where I felt like I could have used a second Harpy, because the Harpy, the Stranglethorn cannon is 2d6 blast, and +1 to hit if it's more than 10 models in a unit. And if I slingshot it with the Swarmlord, I can't shoot. I wanted to be able to shoot and still, maybe like snipe a character or two. And I think that's where having that second Harpy would open up some opportunities there, because I wouldn't have to choose one or the other. I could, do both.
It's funny because Stranglethorn cannons are just like Harpies with Stranglethorn cannons are just not good shooting, but it's like the one profile that you're a little light on. Like you're kind of light on anti-horde stuff in your army. And there is that one list, the Termagant Swarm list, that is a good list. It is a good meta list. The Harpy kind of just like does work against it.
Yeah, because even if it's against Leviathan, 6 up, feel no pain, it's 2 damage.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually see a lot of people run their Harpies with the big guns,
the Venom.
Yeah, but then the big guns are like, you have so much of that profile. You have so much anti-tank shooting and hitting. Not necessarily shooting unless you're bringing the barbed hire duels. And then half the time the Harpies are double moving and charging into things anyway, so you don't actually get to shoot with them that much because you oftentimes want to hide them way in the back. So the Venom cannons are kind of plink damage. So like just save 10 points, bring the Stranglethorns, and then in matchups where the Stranglethorns are good, like they're really good.
Yeah, just start pew-pewing with your birds.
Because the matchups where your anti-tank stuff is good, oftentimes they don't have enough bodies to prevent the Harpy from double moving and deleting their characters, so you didn't care about shooting them anyway.
Yep.
It's also worth noting, very minor here, Stranglethorn cannons, that +1 to hit was before Blast was released. It's actually 10 or more, not just more than 10. So if you ever go up against like a 10-man blob, you're getting +1 to hit.
Oh, right. I forgot the cutoffs. It's just different. 10 +1 to hit. 11 max shots. Great. Every rule, a different cutoff.
Hopefully that'll be fixed in new codex.
I imagine the +1 to hit's just going to be gone.
I think it's just, I agree. I think it just goes away and it's a blast weapon. It's good against swords. It doesn't need anything else.
Yeah. So my last game was up against another Crusher Stampede list. This was a complete clusterfuck of a game. And the best way that I can sum up this game is call a judge. Call a judge. Call a judge. Call a judge. Basically, I don't expect everybody to know all of their rules, 100%. But I also don't expect to be saying, no, you can't, every few minutes over a 3-hour game, especially when this was my 7th game ever with this army, and I'm correcting you on Crusher Stampede rules. Or no, not even Crusher Stampede rules, Tyrannid rules. Basically my opponent was just getting a lot of rules wrong in his favor. Things that, it started off with things that could be, benefit of doubt. Oh, you just forgot, like trying to do a psychic action after casting. Psychic actions are weird. It happens,
Yeah, I actually it took me forever to wrap my head around, you can't I read the rule, I understood, but I was like, there's no way that's what they intended. But no, it's what they intended. You do one less psychic action, and then you're done.
Yep. And then it was things like, oh, okay, my Swarmlord's gonna move this unit, double move this unit, and then he started moving the thing, and I'm like, dude, you're 20 inches away from your Swarmlord. You got to be within 6. And it was just more things where he should have known better, or even if he wasn't sure, he would have, voiced his uncertainty, because, you've played against somebody who's not sure of the rules, and then they'll say like, oh, I think it's, I'm pretty sure it's this, and, you usually wait for the other person to, voice their confirmation. It's like, yeah, I think it is too, or yeah, it is. So let's go forward with that. Nah, this guy was just like, all right, I'm gonna fight on death for 1 CP. I'm gonna roll 5 dice, roll 6 to wound, just kind of just railroading it so that to get it past that point to a game state where it's not easy to roll back the clock, as it were. In situations like that, like you're gonna get a feeling that somebody's acting shady. Just call the goddamn judge over.
Did you do that, Chris?
No, I didn't, and I regret it because this guy ended up placing and beat out one of my friends by 3 points that he shouldn't have earned.
That's nice.
So this, once again, we've talked on this in the past, but this is why like warnings are great. Like, imagine he was just trying to, like, I don't know, swarm lord at 9 inches every time, right? When it's really 6 inches. Like, you do that once, okay. Like, maybe there was a legitimate mistake. Maybe for some reason you thought his aura was a 9-inch ability, because single targets are sometimes 9 inches. Reasonable. You do that the next round. Now the judge knows that you're just like, you've already been warned. Like, if no one ever calls the judge, gets the warning on this guy, he's just never going to have to improve.
Yeah.
Because he essentially gets a new social contract with every single person he plays against, unless someone's tallying the mistakes.
The thing is, like, I was warned about this player, so I was already like on guard. It just so happened that like I knew that I had scored low in my wins, so that I wasn't going to, like, place top 4, like backdoor it. So I said, fuck it, whatever. I'll just keep telling him, no, you can't. I ended up screwing over my friend. So just call over the judge. And if somebody keeps accidentally picking up their wound dice, maybe start writing it down on a piece of paper on your side.
So we've seen this kind of stuff at all levels of the game. It's worth noting that there are legitimate times where mistakes are made, or just like general misunderstandings happen. But it's on both players' side to like not just assume you're strictly correct, especially on something where it's like kind of obscure. We saw in the LVO stream, a person was starting the action with Celestine that lets her heal and bring back a Celestine.
Mm-hmm.
And then move Celestine, but part of doing that action is you can't move.
Well, that was the issue. Part of doing any action is that you can't move. But most actions start at the end of the movement phase, so people think you just can't advance, because you can't advance and start an action. But you can move and start an action. But it turns out you can't start an action and then move. So he thought he could reanimate what am I trying to call him? A Gemini Superior, and then move. His opponent called him out on it, and he just said very confidently, no, I can do this. And then it kind of just happens. And his opponent didn't like press the issue. His opponent didn't call a judge, and his opponent really should have called. But we're just so in that mindset as Warhammer players of like, you don't call judges. Even if like in a world where, and this is the issue of like Warhammer is very different than like Magic Enforcement. In the world where like he goes, all right, I want to bring back a Celestine, and he's like, well, you can't do that. And then they look it up, they find that they can't. They go, okay, the Celestine goes back in the box. A judge still should have been called, because now on camera it's less likely to happen because there's like top 5 and whatever. But like this is like round 2, and my opponent goes, all right, I want to bring a dude back with Celestine. At most events, I'm not going to do anything because we don't have the infrastructure to deal with this. But like, there's a real world where my opponent is a bad actor, and every game with Celestine, he's going to try and bring back a Gemini Superior and see if his opponent, and then move and see if his opponent calls him on it. If they call him on it, he's like, oh, I can't do that. Wow. And then put Celestine back where she was, or not reanimate the Superior. And then next round, just go do it again, because no one told the judge. Nobody knows that my opponent's trying to do this bad thing. Chat pointed out there's also a point where a shield captain on a bike got all the way to the quarterfinals with OBSEC. There was a player in the quarterfinals who thought his shield captain had OBSEC. Now, that was probably a legitimate mistake. Getting to the quarterfinals at LVO, you know what you're doing. On top of that, those things had OBSEC literally the day before, because LVO, or literally like 2 weeks ago because LVO list cutoffs were right like the day that the Custodes book. And the Custodes book used to give sealed captains OPSEC. So it's things like this where we just need warnings from judges so that we know, like, we just need to be in the habit of calling judges, even when your opponent says, I want to do a thing. You can't do that. You look it up and say, oh, couldn't do it. Cool, moving on. Like, I would like us to get to a place where, no, we don't just move on. We actually call a judge and, like, mark down, like, yeah, this happened. So, like, the player knows, people know I did this thing. Like, don't do it again. Because, like, in Magic, I've said, I've called judges on myself. I misplay a thing. Like, well, that's not how that rule's supposed to work. My opponent's like, oh, just, like, put it back or, like, fix the game state. It's like, well, we're supposed to call a judge. We're actually supposed to call someone over and let them know that, like, hey, I did this thing because I wasn't paying attention, and now you know I've done this thing, so if I do it again, you know it's my fault. And yeah, sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Also, judge will often have rules on how in Magic on how they're supposed to wind back the game.
Mm-hmm.
So if we use the Celestine example, and sometimes it's like your opponent gets agency and what happens. So in the Celestine sample, it might be like, all right, do you want their Celestine to be able to move or do the action? You get to pick, like, as the opponent, which is...
well, so technically in that one, because the action completes at the end of the shooting phase, that's when the thing comes back. So you can say, I'm starting the action and then move her. Well, the action's failed. You can't complete the action.
Right.
So you still have the option to move her. It's just the second you do the action. So once you move her, the action is done. You failed it. The Celestian is dead. Or rather, never came. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of, like, nuance there, and there's a lot of, like we said, with the social contract, because Warhammer is a heinously complicated game. People will make mistakes, and it depends on the level of the tournament. At some levels of the tournament, like, I'm at, like, an RTT at, like, a new store, got some new players. It is not feasible to call every single person every single mistake. Like, it's just not. People are going to make lots of mistakes. People are going to forget dents. People are still learning their books. People don't know how their opponent's books work. I'm going to shoot my opponent's models. I'm not going to realize that he was -1 to wound. Whose fault is that? It's an ability on their data sheet, and I didn't calculate it into my rolls. Like, there's a lot that happened. And it's very challenging to say what is on who to remember. Am I supposed to remember that my opponent's models are -1 to wound all the time? Are they supposed to shout it at me every time I pick up dice to roll? Like, how many times do I get to forget it in a row before it is my fault? That's all, like, a very big gray area. But there are some things, like your own models rules, that are very clearly your responsibility now. And on those, I think it's pretty clear that we need to change our idea as a community of how we call people and how we call judges on things.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, it's one of those things where, like, nobody's going to remember all the rules. People are going to misremember rules in their favor, like Who Among Us, right? But when you got a bad actor, you'll pick up on it pretty quickly. That's when you got to call the judge.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I've done that. I've played through an event with a rule incorrectly. I'll give you an example. It was my Tau Grav Inhibitor drones. They reduced the distance your opponent charges, and they reduced it by D3 inches. And I forgot it was D3 inches. I was just playing it as 2, which technically D3 and 2 are very similar, but 2 is more consistent. So 2 is oftentimes just better. I played 2 full rounds of a tournament until my third round opponent was like, isn't that D3 not 2? I was pretty sure it's D3. I looked up, nope, it's 2. I've just been doing it's D3. I've just been doing this wrong. And that's a thing that happens. And I called the judge on myself. I was like, hey, I did this thing wrong. The judge looked at me like I had 3 heads, and they're like, okay, it doesn't really change anything. Why are you telling me this? Because I made a rules mistake. I'm like, you should know as the person running this event. Like, even the judge was a little confused as to why that's a thing that should come to their attention. That's one of the things that Carol and myself and the Northeast 40K TO community are trying to look at changing, like how we enforce rules. We're not there yet. It's going to take a long time to get there, but certainly worth thinking about.
Yeah. From the feedback that I've gathered too, it's that one, most judges hate to hear about stuff after the fact.
Yeah.
And 2, most of them are fucking bored during matches.
Yes, call us over. We have nothing to do.
Yeah.
When I hedged as BFS, I heard bad beat stories from like 4 or 5 people that came over like, hey, my last round opponent like made me talk out the game when you said we can't do that. I was like, not a lot I could do about it now. like that was a round ago. Like, scores are in, next pairings have gone up. I can like have a conversation with the guy, but it's like way too late. I needed to know that when it was happening. If he pressures you into it, like you do it, and then you immediately find me before parents go up and you're like, hey, you like made me do this or whatever. Or you just call the judge over immediately. Like you can't do that. Like I would have yellow carded the guy. If
I remember an RTT that we both were at, and we were talking to a guy who was more of like a casual player, and he was like, "Yeah, you killed my warlord, and then I wasn't able to generate CP anymore." Exactly. It's like we were just like, "Dude, why didn't you call the judge over? Why didn't you call the TO over? Like that's not correct." And he was like, "Yeah, I didn't think it was, but he seemed really confident about it."
Yeah, so we just need to all as a community get more used to calling judges.
But let's move on to the secondary talk. So
sure.
Wait, they weren't playing GT Mission 2.2 out of the new General's Handbook?
Yeah. This was pre that handbook. Now it's a rule.
That is the mission where if you don't have your warlord, you don't get CP.
Yeah, rip Chaos Knights, by the way.
Yeah. Anyway, so this GT used the new missions, the new secondaries, and it played a role in my army construction. Like I said, I brought a Neurothrope, and that was purely for psychic interrogation because you don't need line of sight to enemy characters anymore, which means the Neurothrope is a pretty decent way of doing interrogation.
I think actually beyond that, it means that a lot of armies are going to just plan on taking psychic interrogation.
Yes.
For example, Brady, the winning Custodes list took an Inquisitor, and that Inquisitor, which means he's giving up the ability to take a Porther Witch, and that Inquisitor's probably there to do psychic interrogation and to prevent psychic interrogation.
Oh, it's 100% there because I've played against him before the change, and he was like, "Yeah, this guy." He just walks around interrogating people psychically. That's his entire job.
Yeah, because I've seen that with Brady's list, and he's brought that guy before, and that's like a thing that I think a lot of armies are going to do. You're going to see a lot of like weird cheap psychers. You're like, what does this do? It's like nothing. He scores me 12 to 15 points over the course of a game by reading your character's minds.
Yeah, no, I honestly forgot like what spell I gave my Neurothrope because I never used it. Apparently, it was Paroxysm. But yeah, so that one has a lot more play now. And then for the new rod, retrieve Nachmund data, that's the one where it's no longer guaranteed. You got to roll off for it, depending on how many guys are in your unit and if it's troops or not. Which means that for me, taking like minimum squads of 3 warriors, I got to roll a 4 or under to be able to successfully pull off retrieve Nachmund data, and you can only perform that once. You can't do it, fail, and be like, "Oh, these other guys are going to do it."
Yeah, you can attempt it once, and if you fail, you fail. Oops.
Yep. Which meant that R&D for me just out of the question. Can't do it. Can't take it. I can't guarantee the points. So. What I found a lot of other people are turning to instead of that is engage in all fronts because you just got to be a body for engage.
Don't you have to be more than a body now?
You got to be like at least like 3 or a monster.
Yeah, but three warriors can do it, and more importantly, monsters and vehicles count. So for Crusher Stampede, like every model except actually literally every unit starts the game counting. If you lose a warrior squad, if you lose one warrior of a squad, that squad stops counting. But everything except for your Neurothrope is a thing that counts for engage.
Yeah. My next iteration of list, I might consider like bringing minimum squad of Raveners just for engage as a tech unit, especially if their weapons continue being free. Just because that's a little bit.
Did they have like a little points oopsie?
Yeah, they had a little points oopsie where their weapons are free now, so you just take a Death Spitter and Rending Claws, 1 for 60 points.
It's like probably like they weren't good when they cost points, so maybe they'll be fine now.
I mean,
it may not even have been a points oopsie. It may have just been like Raveners aren't great. Let's make them a little better.
Yeah, Raveners will be the new Lictors, at least for like engage.
I don't know.
So much more expensive.
Yeah, they are.
Like, aren't they like 20 points a model?
They're 20 points a model, so it's 60 points for the unit.
No, but to that's for engage though. If you want to knock Moon, it's 120.
Oh yeah,
I'm not doing
Nachmund data. But
Fair enough.
I mean, there's definitely an opportunity cost now if you're building your list with retrieve data in mind, because you got to take like
6-man
either-
deep strikers or 5-man troops.
yeah, or you're just literally rolling the dice on whether or not you're gonna max that secondary, because you've got to get it in all 4 quarters to max it. That means you can whiff on it once.
I have found the secondary game has changed wildly. Psychic interrogation has become so like we said, psychic interrogation is a secondary that like I'm just interested in taking, and a lot of people are just interested in taking, which now means like a lot of secondaries where people are interested in taking them, you can start to think about, all right, how do I build my army to deny psychic? There are a few armies that can play with all of their characters in the back line. Gene Circles being one that like really jumps to mind, where if you don't have a killer morph on the table, your entire army can play from the back corner of the table because all your characters can throw their auras and spells across the table with no range limit. The other ones, like the Thousand Suns army I currently have designed, taking interrogation against it is kind of a trap. There's 4 characters. 2 of them are buffers that will sit in the back corner and never get close to you. And the other 2 are going to go move, cast my spells, teleport. And then the other one just goes move, cast my spells, warp time, move again away from you to force your characters to way overextend into me to get your interrogation off, at which point my characters will assassinate with psychic powers. So I've
Also, you're Thousand Suns, so if they're taking that power, you're also getting the chance to deny, which is like, it's not a guaranteed, but like,
yeah, I've also moved towards taking the warlord trait where you can reroll deny the witch chests, because I think that psychic secondaries are a thing that a lot of people are going to take, and I want to be able to reroll deny the witch chests against psychic secondaries, just take your points away.
Yeah, so the game that I had versus the other Crusher list, he also had psychic interrogation, and we're basically just trading denies and CP with each other to, all right, I'm going to try deny. That failed. All right, I'm going to spend a CP to deny it on a 4-up. We kept on doing that to each other the entire game because, trade 1 CP to deny 3 VP to your opponent. I'd make that trade every day.
Let me tell you about Cabal points and undeniable psychic powers. The other secondary that I noticed just all of a sudden just super easy is No Prisoners. No Prisoners is just a secondary that I want to take. The bonus points that you get are very good, and the nature of the new mission pack just causes people to put more incidental infantry bodies into their list.
Yep, not only that, the way that the missions are designed now, with the primary being 4, 8, 12 plus the 3 points on the mission second primary, it means that like previously you could sit back on like your 1 and 2 objectives and score your 10 points and then just strike out for 15 one round and you max primary. You do that now, you're only sitting at like, I think 36 points, meaning that you have to go out, you have to try to get that hold more, or you have to try to get that that mission primary, which means that you're just exposing more of your stuff to get murdered, which means more points for No Prisoners.
Yes, more points. On top of that, in the previous mission pack, something that my teammates and I have like tested a couple of times is like, it's actually not particularly challenging, like turn 1, turn 2, to push really hard at your opponent and give them a 0 at on their first, like on turn 2 or turn 3 when they go to score, like in the old mission packs. And in the old mission packs, that was bad because then you take a huge hit and then they're going to score 15s in the last 2 turns, and then they're going to max their primary anyway, so it never mattered that you did that. In the new mission pack, if you push your opponent to a 0, even if they then go, all right, cool, I'm going to like start scoring a bunch of 12s, like they're not maxing their primary. You need to score every single turn, and you need to score 8s or 12s on every single turn. It's really, really hard to max it now.
Yeah, last pack, super easy to just max primary to the point where it was basically you got to pick secondaries that you can try to max or get close to max, and that's how you win. This new mission pack, maxing primary isn't a foregone conclusion. You have to actually go out there and get it.
Yeah, the games I played, in 2 of them, so 2 of them we both played pretty conservatively and had both like medium scoring games. And then in the other 2, we just like someone just pulled the trigger. I'm like, I'm going to try and give you a 0, and then we just traded 0s for 2 turns. Like you get a 0, I get a 0, you get a 0, I get a 0, and just everything died. The game is very killy, or at least I found the game to be way killier given the nature of the new primary, where your primary is like so much more contentious, and the the outcome of that is that things like no prisoners is just way easier to score. Like more of your army dies. It's actually the point where I've started like calculating my lists because remember for the no prisoners, the 100th wound is worth 3 points. If you can actually just build your army to have 99 wounds in it, right? It's the 100th wound?
Yes, 100.
Yeah. If you can build your list to have 99 no prisoner wounds in it, that's like a real game. Like turning that secondary off is pretty significant.
I don't think it's worth 3, if I'm reading this correctly.
It's worth 2, and then it's worth 1 if you get 50 or more.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So it's worth 2. But that's the break point between I can score 10 points and I can score 12, and 10-point secondaries are okay, and 12-point secondaries are just good. So it's worth thinking about if you're at a place, you're looking at your army, you're like, I have 105 wounds in this list. Can you cut 5? Can you like move 5 into like a transport or something? Like keep your durability, but get rid of some wounds. That's like a thing that is interesting. And it's something I've looked at with particularly Tau, because Tau are very interesting with what does and doesn't give up no prisoners, like moving drone wounds into vehicle wounds so that I'm not giving up no prisoners as easily.
Funny note, did we get the no prisoners errata that we needed?
No. What's the errata that we need?
If you score 50 or 99, you don't get the bonus point because they say if you score between 50 or 99, you get a bonus point.
Oh, excellent. But that's fine. That means 50 is not worth anything, but 51 is. So that works. But like 98 being worth something and 99 not is actually like really funny.
This is you look at the TO and like, what do you think GW meant? And they
like, no, you don't get the point. I'm ready for someone to lose a game for that. Oh man, I did not realize that was a thing.
Another big change on kill secondaries is the thresholds for bring it down points.
Everyone just gives that secondary up now. It's so hard to build an army that doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like my list gives up bring it down, but like like rhinos are worth 2 points on bring it down now.
But your list is like easy to score bring it down.
Oh yeah, you're already aiming to kill the monsters, and like a lot of my monsters are worth the 3 points.
Yeah, but before all those 3-pointers were 2. Because the cutoff was 20, and then they moved it down to 15. Now all like Demacrons and Scythe Hieroglyphs will all give up 3 now, and that's really big.
Yep.
Like I don't
previously I would have only given up 10 points. I think
your list gave up 12 before, and now it gives up 17. Like you don't actually have to table it. Like you can leave a Swarmlord alive, a Hive Tyrant alive, and still get the 15 points.
Yeah.
And of note, no prisoners feels like it's a kill secondary. It feels like it belongs in that category, but it doesn't. So if you're not careful, you could end up giving up both. So just be aware of that.
Yep. Let's see what other really changed.
Have you found that any of the faction secondaries have moved the mark for anyone?
Have the faction secondaries?
I mean, Codex ones. We've known the Codex ones, but the ones in the book itself.
Yeah, the ones people who haven't gotten the Codex yet. They're faction secondaries.
I didn't see anybody taking it in my games or in my experience. I didn't hear of anybody taking them. For the most part, they're bad.
The Chaos Space Marine one's really good. Really, really good.
Yeah, the Chaos Space Marine one's really good.
Not only is it really good, one of the missions, the bonus, is literally the Chaos Space Marine secondary copy-pasted. So when you're playing that mission on Chaos Space Marines, you just like, look at these things I need to do. I get more points for them.
Yeah, the CSM one is good. The downside is you got to play CSM.
Yeah, they're not that bad now. Like 12 points for a dude is fine, and like there's still like Forge Worlds list that's just all of the good Forge World tanks and Chaos Space Marines, and that secondary is very good.
Yeah, you can also make like
you didn't hold and kill enemy units on objective, and you need to do that. If you're not doing, you're losing. Speaking of not doing things and losing, I have yet to not take Stranglehold in the game. I think you need to take Stranglehold literally every game.
Stranglehold
it doesn't feel possible to win games that you're not already scoring Stranglehold on. And
So in my experience, Stranglehold was just like a win more button. If you were winning, you're going to win harder.
I did not.
I disagree.
Well, in this version, like I'm in full agreement with you. Like this is something that you're already gonna have to try to do anyway. You may as well get 3 points at the end of your turn for it.
I did not find Stranglehold to be a win more. I found that it was something that you were trying to do pretty consistently for a lot of armies, and with the new rules, with the new missions, and the primary being so hotly contested, you're throwing bodies onto objectives like crazy with the expectation that you're not going to hold them at the beginning of your next turn, which is basically the prerequisite for scoring Stranglehold. So I haven't found myself playing a game yet where I don't just take Stranglehold, because if you don't do that, you're just losing anyway.
Yeah, every game I've had with this pack, I've had Stranglehold. I've had Strangleholds and either grinds. I've always taken Psychic Interrogation so far. I'm just finding for Crusher, I'm having trouble finding like a good like third secondary.
Crusher Stampede secondary game is not the strongest in the new mission pack. I found that Thousand Suns secondary game has been insane. Psychic Interrogation is like free. A bunch of armies have checked into Psychers, which then just gives up Wrath of Magnus, which is a free 15. And then I'm taking Stranglehold.
Yep.
And I have a bunch of teleporting rubric bodies, so if all else fails, I can just take Rod, because they are 5-man troop choices that can teleport in the movement phase or deep strike them for 1 command point. So I found that my secondary game is very easy. But like we said, the primary is way more hotly contested. You can actually keep people from scoring 45s, and it's a lot harder to score your 45, which means armies that are good at scoring the primary, even if they're bad at secondaries, have a lot more play. And in my mind, that's Crusher Stampede. Crusher Stampede is very good at kicking people off of objectives, giving huge monsters counting as 12 obsec flying across the table, stealing objectives out from under people's feet. And so even if your secondary game isn't super strong, you can just beat them on the primary now, because it's much easier to deny primary points, and it's harder to get that 45.
Right, because like I said, maxing primary isn't just, easy peasy.
Mm-hmm.
So even though like it might feel more difficult to score your secondaries, that just means maybe you got to focus more on the primary.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, have you had much experience on the new missions?
I've only played like 2 games, and you guys have said everything I found. Because we've already kind of covered what we thought about the faction secondaries. Unfortunately, they didn't move the mark. Do we really quickly want to hit on the balanced data slate?
Sure. So the balanced data slate did so there was a data slate, and there were a bunch of FAQs. And these are 2 different things according to GW, but they happened at the same time, and they both affect the balance of the game. So they're kind of not. But in terms of what was literally on the balanced data slate, I think everything stayed. Did
Except
anything
for the
get taken off of it?
Technically, the points changes because they're now just part of the chapter approved.
Fair enough. The things that got taken off of it are still part of the game, but they're technically not there enough anymore. More importantly, Talos and Kronos lost the core keyword, and Artisans of Flesh went from always -1 damage to just Orc Ramshackle, which really, I think, moves the needle a fair amount on how good is Thick City, but perhaps not enough. We'll see. Thick City took a hit already from being forced to play monofactions on its Homunculus Coven's half. Not that it has a dearth of... It doesn't have issues finding other things to play. The Drakari book is really wide open. And we also... Looks like we're going to be getting the ability to put a Harlequin patrol into our Drakari armies without breaking faction traits too. So I think City will have other things to play along with its big, thick idiots. Going to Ramshackle...
Keep in mind that actually isn't free for Harlequins, because if you put a patrol... I think it has to be a patrol, right?
Yes.
Well, the Drakari rules is you have to have 3 different Drakari patrols for them to not cost CP.
Yep.
So it is actually costing them... It goes from 0 CP to 4 CP.
Okay. Fair enough.
So it's not actually... The Harlequin detachment is not free.
That's fair. So it will cost them some CP. I wouldn't be surprised if they just go to a real space raid, though, now that they can't bring multiple factions of homunculi. and then it's just 2 CP for the Harlequin Patrol. All right, so Talos and Kronos lose core. This means that they're not rerolling hits. They are not getting +1 toughness from homunculi. I believe it's a little bit harder to heal them. And then also their -1 damage against everything has become -1 damage against things that are strength 7 or less. Where are we at on that, Kevin?
I like that it opens up the threshold or the option. I think army-wide -1 damage is should probably have some kind of way of getting around them, with the exception being Death Guard, because like Death Guard are known for being durable. That like the specialists of durability. Like, don't get me wrong, I know Drukhari Homunculus Covens are like durable, but like it doesn't feel like they're supposed to be as durable as Drukhari.
As Death Guard, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
I might have flip-flopped which one I was saying at the end.
Yeah, you and I have discussed too that we think that -1 damage rolls should probably be -1 to a minimum of 2, because right now it just feels like autocannons and Volkites and all those things are just useless. Like,
May as well be a
why would
bolter.
you ever put a 2 damage weapon in your army? It's just a joke. The entire meta is -1 damage.
So, one of the few games I played was kind of a fun game against a friend. He's new. He's like building up an Iron Hands force, and he brought 3 suppressor squads. And I was playing Custodes, and they were really good into Custodes, because Custodes don't have the -1 damage. And I was like, I almost felt like I was getting cheated, because I'm like, I know this unit is very good if there isn't -1 damage, but like I used to play them in my Iron Hands list, and I had to take them out because there was just so much -1 damage in the meta.
It's like, this isn't fair. I know this exact feeling. It's like, you would lose to a ham sandwich, but I'm getting murdered. It's like, this doesn't work in the meta, but I'm not the meta, so I'm freaking dead. Yeah, I know that feeling very well. Yeah, I do think that they just went a little crazy with giving everything -1 damage. I think it should be minimum 2. I think autocannon should be fine, with the exception of Death Guard. Let Death Guard reduce things down to 1. They're special. Their -1 damage should be better than everyone else's because they're Death
Yeah,
Guard.
it should be.
And
I mean, I remember when they said like heavy bolters were going to damage 2, and everyone's like, oh, they're finally better than, just damage 1 weapons, and then it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah. And it's finally also that Death Guard aren't the faction that's like an issue. Crusher Stampede and Thick City and Orcs to a lesser degree are all very, very powerful armies that are really abusing the control. Their armies are so artificially tough mechanic.
Yeah, even if you're shooting Hive Guard into Crusher Stampede, like only a third of your shots are doing 2 damage.
Yeah, it's also like one of the reasons why CSM are bad right now. And CSM and a couple other armies where, because of -1 damage and like all of like the ramshackle stuff, your weapons want to be bolters or multi-meltas. Like, even las cannons are good, but you want the multi-meltas. You want like the D6 plus a number. And it feels like, so you just like kind of cut out this really wide range of interesting medium strength, medium damage weapons that are just bad now. Same thing with like Ignore AP 1 and 2. There's a fair amount of that flying around. I want to be a bolter like 401 or a multi-melta 8 neg4 D6 plus 2.
I remember like a time
profiles.
I remember a time when obliterators were good, and you re-roll like your damage and stuff. But now you look at it, and an obliterator, you roll D3 for the damage. No, that's horrible.
Yeah, and it feels that, which is like 90% of the game's weapons fall in between strength 4 AP01 damage and a multi-melta, and it just feels like everything in that range is, if you can avoid playing it, you should just avoid playing it. Like, I'm looking at the tile list I'm writing, it's like, I have a bunch of SMS, a bunch of flamethrowers, and rail guns. Like, I'm not taking any rocket launchers. I'm not taking cyclic ion blasters. I'm not taking missile launchers, because all these things are damage 2 or damage 3 or strength 7 or only AP1 or only AP2. Like, I want my AP0 guns with 1,000,000 shots, and I want rail guns, and I want nothing in between there. And that's kind of boring. It makes you have like 3 profiles in your army, because -1 damage and Ignore AP has just pushed everything else out.
Would you rather have an autocannon or a Hurricane Bolter?
Hurricane Bolter. It's not close. Yeah. It's almost like an autocannon. It's the same weapon.
Yeah, except the Hurricane Bolter gets more shots.
Like most things are 2-up armor, or in cover they have 2-up armor, or ignore AP1. The 2 damage is 1 damage against the other half of the targets. So just like give me my million shots. It doesn't matter. It's the same. And that feels bad.
Yes.
Yeah, the proliferation of -1 damage is not great for profile diversity in this game.
Yeah. All right, we've gotten only a little bit off topic for this conversation.
Only a
You
little.
want to pull it back to what was that, Kevin?
It's the main thing that was in the balanced data slate.
Yeah, that's fair. That is the main thing that was in the balance slate. The other thing is that they mess a bit with all the FAQs for various factions. The biggest thing that I could tell is that they removed a lot of weirdness with redeploy abilities, the things that really redeploy at the beginning of the game. At one point, they kind of FAQ'd all of them to be more or less the same, where you could redeploy into strategic reserves, or you could redeploy to back into deep strike. If you were like a Terminator, you were redeploying, you could redeploy into deep strike. And for most of them, they just said, okay, actually, it just says whatever it says on the original printing, and you can't go anywhere else, which kind of just hits some armies really hard, and other armies don't care, because some armies say you can go into strategic reserves and some don't. And how they made this decision wasn't clear, because at one point, talking about Thousand Sons, the Cult of Duplicity Warlord trait said you could just go back into strategic reserves, but it only said this because it got FAQ'd to say this. Originally, it just said redeploy D3 units plus the guy who has the trait. And this is really weird to me, because it's like an arbitrary nerf based on like, it was confusing to have things do not what they say on the book, so we're just going to put them back to say what they say in the books. And it kind of felt like it just ignored power level. Like, Thousand Sons are not crushing events right now, and they got nerfed because they got down a mono-faction. All their good bills are multi-faction. And then they just like ate this another nerf with their best warlord, because it is their best warlord trait. Redeploy D3 plus 1 units. It's a very powerful warlord trait. It got nerfed. No discernible reason.
Ultramarines got nerfed. Alpha Legion got nerfed. What did they do? They're just out here catching strays.
Yeah, it's this is a weird decision. I like it.
So it very much reminds me of the 8th edition. We're going to make things that say, like it's your shooting phase, actually have to be used in your shooting phase.
Yeah.
Change. Where I think it opens up design options for them. Like, now they can actually explicitly make it so that, like, this ability does let you go into deep strike, this ability doesn't let you go into deep reserve, and yada yada. Like,
yeah,
from a game design perspective, I think it allows more options, but like from a balance perspective, it just doesn't feel like it was correct.
Yeah, I don't play Death Guard, so I don't get to be a member of the most injured community by these last changes the last couple of weeks. But I don't feel particularly like noticed by GW right now. Like, at least Death Guard got points changes, not good ones, not ones that make sense, but like GW acknowledged that faction exists. They just like removed words, like good words, from Thousand Sons data sheets, nerfed their best build, nerfed a unit that wasn't even that good for them, but like was viable for them and basically only them. And then just said, cool, this faction with a sub 50% win rate, we just nerfed it 3 times. Print it, no changes. And I don't. Maybe in the upcoming Chaos Space Marine release, Thousand Sons will get some buffs, but I don't think that's going to happen. Sometimes data sheets get updated and then they get like crossed back to Thousand Sons. Like, Thousand Sons kind of already got the data sheet first. I think that everything in the Thousand Sons book on Demon Engine stuff is just going to get reflected in the Chaos Space Marine book, unless they decide that they're pushing stuff. So I don't get it. I'm upset. Rabble.
Yeah.
Were there any other big changes in the DSC or the FAQ? I didn't notice anything huge.
I didn't notice anything. It was kind of stuff that a lot of people were expecting, like
I lied. There's 2 big things.
Custodes, Forge World units getting karate.
Yeah.
Yep.
I apologize. There is actually a big change that we need to talk about. We finally got the official FAQ on things getting out of transports. It used to say things getting out of transports don't count as stationary, and it was very, very vague on they don't count as stationary, or is this turning off rules on their data sheets that would let them count as stationary? And it has now been reworded to specifically say abilities that let you count as stationary get turned off the turn you walk out of a transport, which basically murders Argent Shroud in the cradle and makes everyone just have to play Bloody Rose, which is what people were leaning towards anyway. I say in the cradle, it's Argent Shroud's been out for a while, but people were completely redesigning their sisters' armies based on the mono faction thing, and there were some mono Argent Shroud builds going around, and those are done because nothing in that faction works anymore. So everyone's just gonna be playing mono Bloody Rose. So sisters is a melee faction now.
What was the whole thing about the truck boys?
Oh yeah, truck boys can't charge right now. So right now, when you abilities that let you get out of transports. Currently, there's an FAQ that says if you have an ability that says your transport can move and then you can get out of it, you cannot charge. And this is a general FAQ in the general rule book.
No. That's misunderstood. So it's in the section of rules that say if you have a model that's affected by counted as stationary, and it's saying if this model is a transport and your guys get out, they can't charge. Because it is not because remember when salamanders could like make their impulsors count as not moving,
yes.
and thus the guys could.
I remember this.
So it was actually fixing that. So it's like my understanding. It's a completely different section where if you just cut and paste the section, like it's like an 8-part FAQ. If you just take that one part and read it, it sounds like you can't do it, but you have to like read what they're actually talking about on the whole to understand.
It's all nonsense because truck boys are clearly intended to be able to get out and charge. And even if they did mess up in some way with the wording, like they'll fix it. Truck boys can get out and charge. Otherwise, the faction trade does nothing. More importantly, you can't even put truck boys in your army right now because there's no cutout for them under your whole army needs to be mono sub faction. So never mind getting truck boys out of a transport and charging. It's not legal to play them.
Nice.
Because GW doesn't write rules.
Good job, GW.
Yeah.
It's actually a cult. Oh.
It replaces your bracket keyword, which you can't do because it's not the cult, or not. It's not. You can't. It's not the clan. It's very dumb. They need to fix it.
Good. So I'm glad something like that exists because I would actually be concerned about them fixing the truck charging taking like 3 months. Like air quotes, not important, but I could actually see like not being able to take truck boys at all. Actually, being high enough on the radar for them to like
functioning as intended. Subcultures were banned. Orcs were too good. They know what they did.
Man, does anyone else remember when the stratagem that let in Psychic Awakening that let orcs take vehicle upgrades? They like FAQ'd to say like, does this let you take it if you don't have a
I remember this.
The building, and they wrote no, and then they like on social media is like, we wrote this incorrect in the FAQ, will be corrected soon. Just like
no, they just straight up said we realized from the community backlash that this is perhaps not mechanically problematic if like power level problematic if we just let this happen, and people like these things, so we're just gonna let them happen because they're not competitively viable. Oops, we're sorry. Please don't kill us.
I remember Harkin Warclaimer getting FAQ to only work on Black Legion, and then they were like, "Oh man, you know what? Fine, a Black Legion guy can lead all Raptors. It really doesn't matter. Raptors are unplayable."
Unfortunately, subcultures are playable, so you could convince me that like there's a world where they're just like too good, remove them. However, in that world, they'd be explicit about it. They wouldn't do it by some ramification of an FAQ to a different book. But yeah, so the in terms of real changes that actually happened, Tails and Chronos nerfs, the redeploy strats are all different. So now you can actually go back, read your books, and see if you were randomly one of the lucky ones or one of the unlucky ones. Can you go into Deep Strike? Can you go into Strategic Reserves? Can you go somewhere else? Who knows?
They read that if you can go to Strategic Reserves, it doesn't cost CP.
What does your ability say?
Okay,
it's just they just remove them. It's whatever your ability says. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, because the deceiver doesn't say it.
Doesn't say it doesn't cost CP, but the FAQ to say it doesn't cost CP.
That might be rulebook. I didn't look because I just saw that the T-Suns one that was 3 paragraphs explaining how your roller trait worked was just removed. And I got sad and I stopped looking. Anyway, I'm liking the new missions. I think they're very different the way they play. And they are really I've redesigned my army from a pretty much ground up point. And I'm looking at trying out a couple different things. I've found that some things I thought were going to work didn't. Some things that I was not sure about working are actually working out very well. And the secondaries are just so different. The secondaries and the primary mattering so much more is just really changing the way the game has played. And so far, my experience has been it's just more murdery. Things you just push resources at each other now. But
it really encourages the trade game.
Yeah, it could be. I played a lot of my games against sisters, and that is also just kind of how sisters play. But even against armies that aren't sisters, because I have played a couple games in the new missions against not sisters too with Thousand Suns, I find that I'm just slingshotting Rubric Marines across the table to try and steal objectives out from under people's feet because that's just such a powerful mechanic now. And I'm just trading troops all the time, so I'll be very curious to see what this does to the meta.
So, having the book in my hand, rip the rules section being actually in the book. I miss it already.
Oh no.
In case anyone didn't remember, the old ones actually had like the easy or the core rules. Yes. Yeah, the core rules in the back. And the amount of times I would like have a disagreement with somebody, and then we were just like, what exactly does dense mean? I can see your guy through this line, thus I'm not affected by dense. It's like, okay, here's the dense rules. The dense rules say you have to go through to my entire base. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like in a round 1 kind of setting, or like a doubles tournament.
Yep.
The fact that I now have to carry around my 300-pound book again. Great set. Much sad.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate. All right. Either you guys have anything else to hop in with before we take off?
No, I think we've covered all of it. Kevin, anything on your end?
There's one thing I wanted to check.
Sure.
Do you know if they kept the section in the book that said you can't bring vigilance detachments?
I don't know, but if they didn't, it wasn't intentional that they got rid of it. They're still supposed to be gone.
Are we going back to the Hammer of Sunderance meta? Is it doing tank commanders again?
No, you could bring 2 of them because the Acadian relic has the same thing. Double Sunderance, let's go! If it's gone, it's a mistake. I can't imagine they wouldn't have announced surprise your old books are viable again. Hopefully you didn't throw them out.
Hopefully you weren't like that Wood Elf player who burned his army when it wasn't viable anymore.
Yikes. All right, on that happy note, Chris, want to take us off?
All right. Thank you Thank you everyone very much for listening. This has been 36 Charge. We stream live every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We strive to bring you the best hot takes and sometimes some stupid takes. But until then, until next week, don't roll any ones. Bye, everybody.
Everyone.